How many times, standing amidst the ruins of yet another relationship, have you found yourself caught in the same recurring pattern as if under a spell? A pattern where a partner, seemingly ideal at first, transforms into the living embodiment of everything you despise: their spinelessness, their desperate need for external validation, or conversely, an arrogant self-assurance bordering on cruelty. You're overcome not just by disappointment, but by a deep, corrosive irritation, almost revulsion. Why do these specific individuals with these particular traits repeatedly appear in your life like a persistent motif in your life symphony? Why do you, possessing intellect and experience, repeatedly find yourself drawn to those who seem so alien, so wrong? Imagine your relationships are not merely a meeting of two worlds, but a magic crystal through which you glimpse the most hidden corners of your own soul. Our first lessons about the world, its rules and unspoken laws, were taught long before we learned to consciously ask questions. They seeped into us like water into dry soil. From every glance, every tonal nuance, every approving nod or stern reprimand. It was in this nonverbal yet powerful school, established within the walls of our first home, that we learned not only to walk and talk, but also what it meant to be convenient or inconvenient within the realm of human connections, especially those that promised warmth, security, and unconditional acceptance. Every natural expression, every impulse of our heart underwent an unspoken censorship, forming invisible yet strong walls around what would later become our shadow. It was then, at the fragile age of discovery, that many of us first encountered a paradox: qualities seemingly essential for a full life and healthy, authentic relationships suddenly took on a forbidden, dangerous, or shameful hue. The courage to desire, to assert one's will in love, to actively pursue what the soul craves, could be interpreted as selfishness, excessive assertiveness, or even aggression. Healthy aggression, the inner strength to uphold one's boundaries, to say no to what is harmful, to protect one's vulnerability from intrusion, was often perceived as rudeness, inflexibility, or even cruelty, threatening the fragile peace of family harmony or social approval. The right to make mistakes, to stumble, to be imperfect in seeking one's path to another person, to exhibit natural awkwardness in the dance of intimacy, was often branded as weakness, foolishness, or an inability to be good enough. And vulnerability, the naked sincerity of the soul, the willingness to show one's true self with all its fears, doubts, and hopes, suddenly turned into the sharp pain of being rejected, ridiculed, or worse, exploited and betrayed. As children, we keenly absorbed these nonverbal messages, these subtle currents of disapproval, a parent's gaze, tension in the air, a sudden shift in tone, abrupt withdrawal, all became alarm signals for us. And to preserve the precious warmth of attachment, to avoid being cast out of the paradise of unconditional love, we learn to hide these vital parts of ourselves. We sealed them away in the depths of our subconscious, as if in a dungeon, wrapped them in ribbons of shame, branded them as inappropriate, dangerous, or shameful, creating an internal archive of prohibitions. Thus, a part of our shadow was formed, the aspect directly related to romantic relationships. Into this dark treasury were cast impulses toward true intimacy, toward full, unadulterated self-expression in love, toward the audacity of being oneself, regardless of others' expectations and fear of judgment. This exile was not a single act. It was a process, a slow but steady severing of those parts of ourselves that threatened to disrupt the fragile balance of external approval and internal safety. The price of this severance was high. We condemned ourselves to an eternal search for wholeness, to an unconscious yearning to reunite with what was once rejected. And the deeper we hid these forbidden traits, the more strongly they took root in our inner world, not disappearing, but merely awaiting their hour to manifest in the most unexpected and sometimes painful forms, often through the mirror of our relationships with others, becoming the invisible conductor of our most intimate dramas. But what happens to these fragments once banished from consciousness? They don't dissolve into thin air, these rejected parts of ourselves. No, they are merely exiled, cast out from the bounds of conscious existence, like ancient tribal outcasts condemned to wander the periphery, forever seeking their way back to the warmth of the communal fire. This internal banishment is born of a primal fear, the terror of not belonging, of being unloved, unaccepted. We learn too early that certain facets of our essence, be it untamed desire, untamed will, or the fierce honesty of our anger, were considered dangerous, unsuitable for the fragile ecosystem of family attachment. And so in an act of self-preservation, we became our own executioners, severing these vital parts and burying them deep within the subconscious soil. However, like any debt, these suppressed energies accumulate interest. They are the unpaid bills of our psyche, demanding settlement. And this is not just a metaphor. It is a profound truth of the human spirit. Energy, once generated, does not dissipate. It transforms. It seeks an outlet. And when denied its rightful place in the light of consciousness, it finds subterranean channels, manifesting in ways that seem both alien and irresistibly attractive. It is this restless energy that often orchestrates the most mysterious dramas of our lives, especially on the intimate stage of romantic relationships. It is here, in the realm of love and longing, that the shadow performs its most intricate dance, often through the mechanism of projection. We look at another, and instead of seeing them in their naked authenticity, we, in a sense, become prisoners of Plato's cave, chained by our own unexplored assumptions. We perceive only flickering shadows cast upon the wall of our perception, mistaking these phantoms for the true essence of the beloved. The figures we despise, the traits that provoke irrational rage or contempt within us, are often merely reflections of our own exiled parts, those very aspects we deem too dangerous or shameful to acknowledge. The partner becomes an unwitting screen onto which we project our own unacknowledged fury, our suppressed vulnerability, our unfulfilled desires. We are drawn to them not for who they are, but for what they unwittingly represent, a mirror, albeit distorted, of our own unintegrated wholeness. This intricate interplay of light and shadow, this profound delusion, shapes our romantic destinies with an almost tragic inevitability, as if the universe, in its infinite wisdom, conspires to present us with precisely those individuals who most perfectly embody the qualities we have disavowed within ourselves. And what exquisite irony it is that the very traits that repel us most fiercely in others often cry out loudest for recognition within our own inner landscape, demanding integration, seeking their way back from cold exile. There are certain archetypes, certain patterns of being that seem to serve as particularly potent vessels for these projections, eliciting reactions within us that defy logic and reason, drawing us into cycles of attraction and aversion that feel both predetermined and deeply frustrating. When the veil is lifted and the magic of the early days dissipates, what stands before us is not merely a person, but a distorted mirror reflecting what we once exiled from our own soul. It is at this moment that we encounter archetypes which, like shadows from ancient myths, emerge from the depths of our unconscious, taking on the flesh and blood of our partners. They embody the very traits that we, for the sake of survival in a world of others' expectations, imprisoned in the dungeon of our subconscious. And here they are, our personal demons, appearing in the guise of our loved ones. The first of these is the apathetic drifter. This is someone who seems devoid of all will, whose life flows along the path of least resistance, who avoids decisions, initiative, even having an opinion. There is no spark in them, no desire for change, just passive agreement, or worse, quiet, inert resistance. They evoke not just irritation, but a deep, irrational contempt, almost hatred. Why? Because their inaction is our own suppressed right to inaction, to pause, to opt out of the endless race which we have forbidden ourselves. We see in them our own weariness, our unrealized dream of peace, but instead of acceptance, we react with fury to their weakness. The second is the arrogant oracle. In their eyes, there is eternal righteousness. In their words, an unshakable confidence bordering on arrogance. They always know best, are always ready to lecture, always above petty doubts. They don't listen, they pontificate. This archetype evokes burning indignation, a desire to immediately cast them down from their pedestal, to shatter their infallibility. Their arrogance is our own exiled drive for dominance, for recognition of our worth, which we learn to hide under a mask of humility. We despise their pride because we are afraid to allow ourselves even a drop of our own greatness. And finally, the wounded victim. This is a person whose life is a continuous string of misfortunes, who constantly blames the world, fate, or others for their troubles, who wallows in self-pity, demanding endless sympathy but never seeking a way out. They evoke an unbearable, suffocating weariness mixed with revulsion and a desire to flee without looking back. Their helplessness is our own locked-away vulnerability, our right to be weak, which we so carefully conceal, fearing to appear incapable. We do not allow ourselves to be a victim, and therefore it is unbearable to see it in another. Recall Andrew, whose relationships seemed cursed. Each woman in his life, ideal at first, eventually transformed into the embodiment of his worst nightmares. The last was Anna. At first he was charmed by her calmness, her ability to accept life as it is, her gentleness. He, a man of action, always rushing, saw an oasis in her. But after a year, this calmness turned into all-consuming apathy. Anna never wanted anything. I don't care. You decide. Whatever you say. These phrases became the refrain of their days. Andrew, who as a child was punished for the slightest display of initiative, learned to be convenient, suppressing his will to act. Now he was confronted with its hypertrophied reflection. His rage grew with every passive yes from her, with every unexpressed desire. He tried to rouse her, provoked, pleaded, but Anna only sank deeper into her inertia, as if embodying his own suppressed fear of error and inaction. He despised her for allowing herself to be what he himself was forbidden to be. These archetypes are not merely flaws in other people. They are beacons pointing to those parts of ourselves that we have rejected. And in each of these demons lies not only pain, but also the strength, the resource that we once repressed, making it our worst enemy. We called them demons, these phantoms of exiled qualities that take on flesh in our partners. But the time has come to look deeper, beyond the veil of anxiety and rejection, to discern the true face of these distortions. For every demon is not a curse, but an encrypted message, a distorted reflection of a powerful force that was once rejected. They carry not a vice, but a repressed right, a precious ability that we hastily locked away in the dungeon of the unconscious. Recall the apathetic drifter whose spineless passivity is so irritating, so paralyzing. Hidden in their shadow is not just inaction, but a deep, almost mystical right to peace and trust. It is the ability to release the grip of control, to allow things to unfold in their own time without interfering with every breath of life. It is the right to inner silence, to contemplation, to simply be rather than constantly do. We exiled this part of ourselves, fearing to appear lazy, irresponsible, fearing that the world would collapse without our incessant control. But in this suppressed quality lies the wisdom of surrender, the strength of acceptance, the depth of presence that doesn't demand constant activity. Then appears the arrogant oracle, whose haughty tone and desire to dominate evoke only repulsion. Beneath the mask of their arrogance hides something far more fundamental, our suppressed right to self-worth and authentic self-assertion. It's not just a desire for recognition, but an inner conviction of one's own importance, the right to one's voice, one's opinion, one's truth. This is healthy assertiveness, necessary for setting boundaries, for protecting one's space, for demonstrating leadership qualities. We relinquish this right, fearing to appear selfish, arrogant, fearing to be rejected for our pride. But the true power of the oracle is not in suppressing others, but in the confident radiance of one's own light, the ability to take one's place in the world without apology, to assert one's will, and to lead. And finally, the wounded victim, whose self-pity and constant blame of others are utterly draining. Their lament contains not a desire to manipulate at all, but a desperate, cornered right to vulnerability and genuine compassion, is the ability to acknowledge one's pain, imperfections, mistakes, without hiding behind a mask of invincibility. It's the right to be weak, to ask for help, to share one's pain, and to receive support. We exiled this part, fearing to appear weak, dependent, fearing we wouldn't be loved if our flaws were seen. But in vulnerability lies immense strength, the power of authentic connection, the depth of empathy, the wisdom of understanding that to be human means to be imperfect and in need. It's the right to unconditional self-love, even in the most vulnerable states, and to accept that love from others. These unacknowledged facets cast into shadow do not disappear without a trace. They continue to influence our choices, our reactions, the very fabric of our relationships, creating patterns we so desperately try to break. How skillfully the psyche weaves its invisible nets, drawing us into dances with those who, we believe, utterly fail to match our ideals. Time and again, we find ourselves in the embrace of the wrong people, the spineless, the arrogant, the perpetually suffering, and our heart, bruised by yet another disappointment, asks, why again? Am I doomed to this endless cycle? The answer, as always, lies not externally, but in the depths of our own self, in those rejected parts of us that take on flesh and voice in our chosen partners. Recall Andrew, whose own initiative was suppressed in childhood, replaced by the belief that good boys don't make noise. The fear of becoming an aimless drifter as he subconsciously perceived his father drove him to throw himself into work, avoiding any pause, any opportunity to simply be. And what happened? He invariably chose women in whom this suppressed part found refuge. Anna, his last beloved, was the embodiment of the very apathy Andrew so fiercely suppressed within himself. Her unwillingness to make decisions, her passivity, her constant "I don't care" provoked fits of inexplicable anger in him. He tried to rouse her, inspire her, save her from inaction, when in reality he was battling his own inner demon, the fear of stopping that he had once condemned to exile. Her every aimless day was an unbearable reminder to him of his own right to rest, to trust the flow of life, to simply exist without constantly trying to prove his worth. This struggle was exhausting, destroying relationships that could have been a haven for his weary soul. Or take Maria, whose voice was silenced in youth when any display of self-worth was interpreted as selfishness or arrogance. Striving to be good and understanding, she learned to suppress her healthy assertiveness, her right to uphold boundaries. The fear of becoming an arrogant oracle, like her domineering mother, led Maria to choose partners who easily took on the dominant role. Denis entered her life, charismatic, self-assured, but often disregarding her opinion, easily capable of invalidating her feelings. Maria suffered, feeling invisible, suppressed, but every time the urge to object was on her lips, an internal censor stopped her. Don't be like her. Don't be arrogant. Don't be selfish. And so her unexpressed desires, her suppressed will, her stifled worth accumulated, turning into a dull resentment that ultimately destroyed even the most promising connections. She unconsciously chose those who forced her to confront her own powerlessness, that part of her that yearned to be heard and recognized. Perhaps at this moment your inner voice whispers, "But that's not me. I hate spinelessness. I despise arrogance. How can that be my shadow?" And in this whisper lies the deepest trap. Precisely because you so fiercely reject these qualities, so desperately strive not to be like your demons, they gain such power over your life. You don't allow yourself even the slightest manifestation of these qualities, fearing it would open the floodgates and engulf you entirely. This fear of being like what you have condemned and exiled from yourself leads you to make unfavorable decisions. You either attract partners who are the living embodiment of your shadow, so you can fight it externally, or you overcompensate in the opposite direction, becoming hyperactive, hyper-modest, hyper-self-sufficient, thereby depriving yourself of wholeness and genuine connection. Suffering arises not from the quality itself, but from the internal conflict, from the war you wage with yourself, projecting it onto those you choose to love. These wrong partners are not a punishment, but a mirror persistently showing you that it's time to reconcile with what you have long rejected. And yet, the shadow is not only what we reject within ourselves. There is another side to it, no less insidious, but clothed in the golden robes of admiration. It manifests in those we put on a pedestal, in those whose qualities seem unattainable to us. We've discussed the shadows lurking in the depths of our unconscious, those repressed aspects that, like uninvited guests, knock on the doors of our relationships, manifesting as the wrong partners. We explored how the spinelessness of the apathetic drifter or the arrogance of the arrogant oracle merely serve as distorted mirrors of our own once rejected qualities. But the shadow, like life itself, is multifaceted. It doesn't just hold our fears and unsightly traits. In its golden depths also lie our undeveloped gifts, our dormant power, our untapped potential. Let me introduce a concept that Carl Jung called the golden shadow. This is not a dark abyss, but a sparkling casket full of treasures that we mistakenly attribute to others. We meet someone, and in their eyes, their demeanor, their talents, we see something so dazzling that it evokes an almost reverent admiration within us. It might be their indomitable will, their bold creativity, their serene calmness, their capacity for deep empathy, their unyielding self-belief. We elevate this person to a pedestal, turning them into an idol, a benchmark, a living embodiment of what we feel is missing in ourselves. It is here that a subtle, almost imperceptible act of sabotage begins. Admiration, in its essence, is energy. When we direct this energy outward onto another person, we deprive ourselves of the opportunity to invest it in our own development. We project onto a partner or anyone who becomes the object of our admiration, our own unrealized abilities, our untapped talents, our yet unmanifested greatness. Oh, how I wish I could be as brave as he is, we whisper, forgetting that the spark of that courage already smolders somewhere within us. Her ability to create wonders is simply astonishing, we exclaim, not noticing how our own hands yearn for creation. This idol in romantic relationships often becomes our partner or the one we desperately seek to attract. We choose them not only because they seem ideal, but also because they carry the projection of our own bright qualities, put off for later. We unconsciously imbue them with all the inner strength that is ours by birthright, but which we, for some reason, decided to lock away. Imagine you possess a chest of jewels, but instead of opening it and adorning yourself, you hand the key to another person, content to merely admire how the gems sparkle around their neck. This isn't just admiration, it's alienation. Alienation from one's own potential. We become passive observers of our own potential life, lived through the lens of another. We bestow upon our partner our inner freedom, our capacity for self-expression, our unique wisdom, our true passion. And the more we empower them with these qualities, the more drained and incomplete we feel ourselves, the stronger the sense that something vitally important is missing within us. The paradox is that sometimes it is precisely this feeling of emptiness that drives us to seek out another idol, completing a vicious circle. Understanding this dynamic is the first step toward liberation, for if the dark shadow points to what we've rejected within ourselves, the golden shadow illuminates what we haven't yet dared to accept and express within ourselves. The true alchemy of relationships begins when we stop seeing in another merely a reflection of our fears or unfulfilled dreams and begin to discern something else in them, something that is only part of a deeper universal process. And now, with the veil lifted, the shadow named, and the golden radiance recognized as our own, we stand on the threshold of a new understanding. Relationships that once seemed a labyrinth of others' flaws and virtues transform into an artful mirror, reflecting not the partner, but ourselves. Now that we've realized that the one who irritates or inspires us to awe merely carries the echo of our own repressed or unrealized part, it's time not to flee from this reflection, but to step through it. The philosophy I propose is not about seeking a soulmate who supposedly completes your deficiencies. It's about becoming a whole, self-sufficient being, capable of sharing that wholeness, not a need with another. It's an alchemy of the soul, where the lead of our projections transforms into the gold of true self-discovery. Imagine, every time you previously struggled with a partner's spinelessness, you were actually fighting your own suppressed right to peace, to trust the flow of life, to sacred non-doing. Every time you bowed before another's charisma, you denied yourself the right to your own radiance, to the manifestation of your unique power. The essence is to reclaim what was unconsciously given away. This applies to both the qualities we despise and reject, our negative shadow, and those we deify and onto which we project all our unfulfilled dreams, our golden shadow. The power we bestow upon these projections is colossal. It fuels dramas, illusions, and endless cycles of disappointment. But that same power, returned to its source, to yourself, can transform your life, making it not a battlefield, but a canvas for creation. Let's take the first step toward this integration. I call this exercise the echo of the inner mirror. 1. Identify the echo. Recall a partner or type of partner from your past or present whose qualities evoke the strongest emotions in you, whether intense aversion, irritation, or conversely, an inexplicable, almost painful admiration. Choose one such, most prominent quality. For example, if irresponsibility always irritated you, or you always admired fearlessness. 2. Find the source. Ask yourself slowly and with complete honesty, at what point in my life was I forced to suppress this quality within myself? Or when did I decide I wasn't worthy of it and began projecting it onto others, seeing them as either a monster or a deity? Perhaps as a child you were punished for irresponsibility when you simply wanted to play instead of study, or you were taught to be modest and you suppressed your fearlessness and the right to shine brightly. 3. Reframe the shadow gold. If it was a negative quality, for example, that very irresponsibility, try to see its original positive gift. It might have been the ability for spontaneity, to trust the world, to experience joy without considering the consequences. If this is a positive quality, e.g., fearlessness, recognize the fear that prevented you from expressing it. Perhaps it was the fear of judgment, failure, or being too much. 4. Integration step. Devise a small, concrete, safe step that will allow you to begin manifesting this quality in your life, but now consciously from a new understanding. If irresponsibility has become spontaneity, allow yourself to do something completely unplanned this coming weekend, simply following an impulse. If it's fearlessness, be fearless for a moment in a small way. Voice your opinion in a meeting, try a new hobby, allow yourself to take a risk in something that previously seemed daunting. This isn't about becoming irresponsible or reckless, but about reclaiming a suppressed part of your life force. This process is not a one-time act, but a journey to reclaim all the fragments of your soul scattered through projections. And when we start gathering these parts, when we stop seeing others merely as mirrors for our internal dramas, relationships change. They cease to be battlegrounds or sources of perpetual deficit. They become a space for two whole beings to meet. But what happens when the mirror becomes transparent? When we see our partner not as a projection, but as a separate, unique universe? How do we build intimacy when the familiar anchors of our illusions disappear? We will discuss this and much more next time as we delve into the true nature of connection that transcends reflection.